Hello, everyone. My name is Tim McDougall, CEO of Amadea Pharma, and I welcome all of you to the last edition of our Design New Ways of Working Medical Affairs series of webinars. Today, our topic is smarter medical decisions with KPI graded recommendations. And today, I have the pleasure of hosting our special guest, Alan McDougall, former Senior Vice President of Medical Affairs for Europe and Canada, a physician who is an expert in unlocking winners in medical affairs, building winning teams. This is in his profile, in his background, and has a global expertise. Very happy to have him here. He's an inspiration personally, based on a lot of the messages and learning that he shares globally, conferences that I've attended and I've learned from. So I'm absolutely happy to have him here, and going to give him a chance to introduce himself, provide more about his background as well. Alan, welcome.
Thanks, Tim. It's good to be here. Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up. Formerly of Astellas, in between jobs at the moment, but I will be starting with a new role in July, but I won't go public about that just yet. But it's just good to be here and chat to a few people on a very important topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I want to again introduce and welcome Alex Pasek, a physician as well, and expert in management consulting, strategic partnerships, SAP, enterprise software. And he has been a regular speaker in this series and shared a lot of great insights. Alex, welcome. Please provide some of your background as well for our audience.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Great to be here. Very excited to go with the webinar. Alex Pasek, physician by training, worked several years in life science and consulting, worked for a couple foundations, and worked closely with pharmaceutical medical device companies, and also tying that into some of the SaaS experience that I have, just working with startups and helping sort of the field grow.
Okay, wonderful. Well, as promised, I told everyone in my via social media, LinkedIn, that I'm going to make this announcement here in the beginning of the webinar. Those of you who have registered and who are live, you're going to have a chance to participate in an exciting innovation competition that we're actually hosting for the 4th year in a row. So, and you're going to have a complimentary registration, okay, to our 4th annual Medical Innovation Olympics. I'm going to share the code, the discount code, Amadea Webinar, later as well. So thank you all for joining. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as well. Let's get started. Here's the outline of the discussion. We're going to talk about how medical affairs has changed, and be very critical, debate, discuss a lot of the root causes for some of the problems we're facing today in medical decision making. It takes about 800 decisions typically during drug development, and each of these decisions have a life or death consequences for patients. Alan will share a real-world case study as well that we're excited about cross-functional KPIs to drive impact. And we'll also talk about Ancora. This is an industry-first centralized platform for analytics that Amadea Pharma has developed that's designed for smarter decisions, make those tougher decisions easier and more objective. Okay? And so let's start to talk about how medical affairs has changed, because we know that there are new demands for accountability, higher accountability for the business. At the same time, we know that medical affairs is instrumental in generating real-world evidence, okay, through various different sources, claims databases, and others. Right? A recent study also that had cross-functional insights from regulatory affairs leaders, various different types of leaders within pharma, analyzed a lot of data, and they determined that generating real-world evidence increases maximal product revenue for companies by 31%, and it also speeds up maximal product revenue by 22%. So it decreases the time to those maximal peak product revenues. And if we consider that, just the magnitude of this, right, over the last 30 years, product revenues in pharma range from 6.5 billion to 15 billion. Okay, just total product revenue. And so if you consider the 31% increase, that's quite a large, growth, right? From about $2 to $5 billion. And so I want to actually start by asking Alan and Alex why KPIs are important today, in our environment.
Okay, maybe I'll kick off and I'll let Alex jump in. But I think when I started in the industry, which was almost 30 years ago now, we didn't have functions like medical operations. Medical affairs budgets were tiny. They were really just for travel. If we wanted to do an activity like an advisory board, we had to go cup in hand to marketing or somebody, the general manager, and we'd get some money, we'd do things. Real world data was laughed at. Everything had to be the double-blind, randomized, controlled trial, and that was it. Move on a decade or two, and suddenly people realize the value of medical affairs in generating real world data, because real world data turns out to actually be of great interest. People who had a better understanding of the limitations of phase 3 clinical trials realized that actually they exclude a lot of people that are normally seen day to day in a clinic. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we needed to generate those data, and medical affairs were the natural generators of those data. Development's not that interested. So it's down to medical affairs. So the rise of medical affairs over the last couple of decades meant that there was also a massive increase in budget spend, which is great. But of course, that then surfaces to the C-suite, and they say, oh, wow, we're spending quite a lot of money on this group of people. What are we getting in return? And that's the great dilemma. And there, we can't just do things on the basis of hope that it will make a difference, blind belief. C-suite people, they need facts. They don't want feelings, they want facts. And therefore, when we get to that level, they want some hard data as to why they should invest their money in this group of people rather than spend it on marketing or sales or something else. So I think that's the change that we've seen over the last couple of decades. But Alex, I don't know if you want to jump in and maybe expand or add.
Of course. Yeah, totally agree there. Alan, your history probably dates me a little bit, especially as we went in more to real world evidence. I think like you said, it's sort of more and more accepted now and used. And when you do have that need for, providing metrics, right, for a BU, a business unit, like medical affairs, it becomes very important, especially, when senior leadership is looking at dashboards and, calculating spend. And so that all this is helpful to run a, pharmaceutical or medical device business, especially, like you said, when there are sort of budgets being looked at with a little more scrutiny.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, there are various different actions, right, that we need to consider. Both of you mentioned about, the data, dashboards, right, Alex? And so there are currently more ways to measure performance than ever, right? And so one of the key takeaways from a presentation that, Alan, you had at the Financial Times conference in London a couple of years ago was that we need to work a little bit differently, right? Design new ways of working today, right? Where the resources are a little bit more tight, right? Maybe work more collaboratively across organizations with commercial, right? And have more systematic scientific ways to measure performance, which we'll talk about here. And so with that segue, I know that you've managed large budgets, Alan, as you mentioned. Okay, 100 million, right? Budgets in medical affairs. So how do you change your decision making when budgets change and when accountability changes?
Phew. It's a great question, and the answer probably won't be much of a surprise. When you look at what is generating your revenue as a business, you will have some priority list of products. And if you have to make some budget cuts, then you're going to start off with the lowest value products and try and focus on the highest value products, where possible. You have to take into account life cycle stage, of course. You don't want to be investing in clinical trials 6 months before a patent expiry or loss of exclusivity. That doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But really, you want to be focusing down on what's going to generate the most value for the company at the end of the day. And that's, it's obviously true in the commercial side of the business, but it's true in medical as well. We have to really be careful. If we're asked to cut back, we just need to cut back where it'll make the least impact on the top line, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's quite a sensitive and timely issue today, right?
I'm not afraid. I'm not embarrassed. I know we might touch upon it a bit later on, but I'm not embarrassed. Yeah. We work for-profit companies. We're not working for charities. And while medical will never sell or be involved in selling, we all work for a business that has to be successful. If we're successful, we can invest in more research and develop more medicines. So it's in everybody's interests that we are successful. But today we are seeing cutbacks. We're seeing cutbacks across the globe. There are very difficult geopolitical circumstances right now, which is making a lot of companies feel uneasy. So yeah, and we just have to be businesslike and mindful and ready to say, you know what, we can hold back that investment, unless it's absolutely critical for, I don't know, patient safety reasons or whatever. We can hold back those investments and just focus down on what will bring in the most value at the end of the day.
Yep. Great. Well, I want to take a quick pause and remind the audience, this is your chance to ask some questions and comments. Okay, Alan, Alex. And so keep thinking about the questions as we, even throughout the presentation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the root causes of some of the problems in decision making, because not everyone is always very successful in making these difficult decisions, right? So the quality, the speed, the line of sight, the visibility that we have in decision making, the cost of these decisions, right? How we communicate them, how we analyze them, all of these problems, right? And so, since this is the last of the series of the webinars, we're going to reinforce and some of the concepts we've shared previously. One of them is that we continue to make decisions based on data that is not always of the highest quality. It's inconsistent, a lot of disconnected platforms. We don't really know how we're distributing our work in order to understand how to forecast appropriately, right? We don't analyze our activities systematically, and it's leading to a lot of lost revenue, wasted resources, inaccurate forecasting, and others. Now, here are some data in terms of current gaps and metrics that we've shared before, Alan and Alex. As you'll recall, we're currently measuring mostly activities. This has been the trend, the standard, right? And insights and the knowledge that we transfer, which we know a lot about already, right? And what we need to be measuring more are the direct outcomes, direct clinical outcomes of our education, information that we disseminate and generate together in medical affairs. Here's some more data from Viva, a survey of 100 medical affairs leaders in the field who work with customers, with HCP community to educate them. And again, it's consistent types of feedback that we're getting from our own industry, right? We should be measuring how we change clinical practice. And even more recent data, a global survey of 1,000 medical affairs professionals across 63 countries shows that we don't believe that we're very effective in how we are measuring our performance. And here are some of the gaps from this very same survey, right? In terms of engagement quality, feedback from KOLs. We want to be getting the feedback on the service that we provide through medical education directly more. We want to have more qualitative data, but we want to analyze it more, right? And the data that we disseminate ultimately drives a lot of important decisions, important medical decisions. Okay, and so the question really is, how do we make this data more objective rather than subjective, right? So feedback from manager is 70%, and currently, but does it substitute, or should it be more complementary towards the direct feedback from KOLs as well? These are some of the questions that we want to now start to think about here on our panel. And before I ask this question again here, and I'm very interested in Alan's perspective, I'm going to play a quick video of a previous webinar, okay, for everyone. And the question really is, should we link business impact back to medical affairs contributions? Why or why not? We need to trace back why do we really need to trace back the success of a company or a product launch or an outcome back to medical affairs? If we're part of a team, we work together with sales, with others, do we really need to trace that outcome back to medical affairs? So,
well, I'll jump in, Tim. I think there's a couple of thoughts I had. One is just resource allocation. If you're able to demonstrate your value to the organization, then you're more likely to get resources to continue functioning or expanding. I also think in this day and age where there's so much contraction, companies are changing hands, assets are changing hands with mergers and acquisitions. Being able to, it could be preservation.
You have to justify the resources, right? Otherwise, you may be undervaluing your teams, right? Or just considering yourself as a cost center.
I'll jump in then. I'll use this as an example: marketing. So you've got intangible, tangible, right? Tangible is made revenues. Intangible, we think it had a big impact, but we haven't been able to tie it to that revenue. Marketing budgets always get cut when things are going well because you think you're not needed. Then the revenues go down and suddenly magically the marketing budget goes up again. So I think it's being able to show the work and the impact that function that is more intangible has on the overall performance of the organization is critical.
You don't have to tie it to medical affairs. You don't have to, right? And then it's going to come and it's going to have probably a negative impact either on the team and then on the company overall, because you need to be able to show the impact, and medical affairs is constantly working behind the scenes. And so when everyone's acknowledged, I think it does help sort of create sort of a better business case for increasing budgets in medical affairs, and also sort of increasing your visibility throughout the organization.
So this is somewhat of a debate, and Alan, what is your commentary? Why do we need to trace back?
Yeah. So I think Jeff New said it, when he talked about resourcing, because, and to my earlier comment, if the C-suite can't see the value in their investments in this function, then they will cut. They have, that's their job. Their job is to make sure the business runs to the best of their ability. Now, I want to make another comment, which is it's impossible to tie outcomes directly and solely to medical affairs, because we work in a very cross-functional environment, and I'm never going to claim that because medical affairs run a real-world data study that is solely responsible for the sudden growth. Because salespeople are involved, marketing people are involved, market access people are involved, HR people are involved. So, but, and I think, we, as much as we'd love to say, yes, we did this and it equates to X, we've got to still think that and remember rather, that we're part of a cross-functional collaborative team. And that means that we sometimes have to work on explaining our value internally as well as externally so that marketing get it. But to your earlier point, Tim, about the close collaboration, that's exactly what we need. Marketing need to fully understand, and sales need to fully understand what it is that we do and what we offer and why it's important. Because honestly, when we're not in the room, they will defend us and say, yeah, we need medical spend. We need spending because it's important and we get it, we understand it. I think, I think we need to think about tying back, outcomes to medical affairs activities, but we'll never do it in isolation. We'll never be able to say, that this percentage was all down to us. And that's not the way to be thinking.
Yeah, great. Fair point. Completely agree. I'm really glad you brought that up. I have a quick follow-up, Alan. Since I've spent 20 years in medical affairs, I was quite surprised to see some of the data from the 2025 MSL Society survey showing 40% of teams actually surveying physicians directly and 62% wanting to do that more. What is just your opinion on that? Just collecting that data systematically, just hearing from the very customers whom we serve.
So I'm aware of one colleague who decided their KPI was going to be the quality of the KEE feed or KOL feedback. That was going to be their metric. And everyone went up in arms. They said, no, we can't do that. It's dreadful, oh gosh. Well, they did it. And funnily enough, the quality of the interactions all improved and the feedback was glowing because that's what was being measured. And we all know that what's measured gets done. So therefore, everyone really prepared for their KE interactions as they should have done anyway. But now that it was being measured, it was super important. So actually, it did work. Now, my concern is fatigue, KOL fatigue. If he sees, he or she sees, I don't know, 10 people in a week, he doesn't or she doesn't want 10 surveys in a week. Now I'm told that the survey that this company used were very short and quick, but even so, these are busy people and we must be super respectful of their time. And we're doing it not to improve their outcomes, their lives, but to improve what we're trying to do. So I think we need to be careful, but I also think it's a good thing to seek the feedback. How useful was that interaction? Let's be honest. If a healthcare professional doesn't think that interaction was useful, he unlikely to see that individual again. So it's in everyone's best interest to make sure that every interaction counts and that we do make a difference.
Okay, great. Alex, anything to add there, or?
Totally on board. I mean, I think back to the video, I think, Jeff and Graham did a great job sort of discussing the need for, highlighting medical affairs strategic value, because the sort of most base case, it's going to help secure funding, right? The tangible proof of impact makes it easier to defend, next quarter's budget, next year's budget. And so it is hard there's still a challenge in a lot of gray area between, what medical affairs has done with sales, with marketing, and how does it all fit? So it's a team sport, back to Alan's point. So agree fully with all of the conversation.
Sure. There's also some data that, recent data that I've seen that shows how physicians want to partner. They're bombarded with a lot of data. They're busy, like you said, Alan. Right. And so it's kind of interesting and but I think worthwhile to think about how we are more creative in partnering with them and demonstrating the customer service, right, that we're delivering. And it may not be surveys, it may be something else, but partnering nonetheless and communicating the performance data back is, I think, a very current discussion. We had one comment, by the way, Jay, from Jay Patel. Appreciates our webinar. So he's asking about how the quality of HCP engagement demonstrates value for cross-functional teams. So I think you addressed it, but feel free to expand and elaborate, Alan?
Yeah, Jay, thanks for the question. It's a really good one. I think this is back to my point about making sure our internal stakeholders know. So great to do these surveys, but we need to be able to share them if it's good news or if it's bad news.
Yeah.
We need to be able to share them and say, hey, look, the feedback we're getting is strong and positive, and they are saying, we're making a difference. Perhaps they're rating our company higher than a competitor company, and that's always of interest, of course, as well. Similarly, it could be that we're not rated as highly, and therefore we need to do some work with our field medical team. So the quality of the insights, I'm glad you raised that, Jay, because the quality of the insights is just one of these perpetual questions and debates that we have. What is an insight? What some people say, well, it's something you can do something with. It's something that's actionable. Well, that's great. But then you can action a lot of things. Is it worth doing that action? So I think there's an awful lot to, and I don't want to go off on a tangent on insights, but I do worry a little bit. I really worry when someone puts down a metric for, 5 insights in a year or something. For me, that's, you will get 5 insights, but will they be actually any use? But if you measure it, you'll get it. So I'm not sure. Quality of insights is very subjective, but KOL feedback is great. And I think, it's definitely something we should be doing more of if we can find a way to do it rapidly, quickly, and with minimal impact on the HCPs.
Yep. Okay. All right. So since we're talking about the second part of our 4 topics that we want to address here, and that is the problems in decision making, right? This is a diagram of root causes of inefficiency. Okay. We have lots of different metrics to choose from that are externally focused, right? They're not all used in the same platform. They're variable. They're in multiple locations, right? But we don't have as many metrics and as much time to analyze our own workflows. And the last webinar last month, we talked about how work doesn't seem to stop in healthcare, right? So you better make it count, right? So you better make sure that you what you're doing is actually has an impact, and particularly in healthcare and in medical affairs, right? So workflows or behaviors, how well medical works with sales, ultimately determines whether or not a product, the safest product, the best product in the world, actually makes it and is successful and reaches patients, right? Incentives, collaboration. So these are some of the blind spots, and that are measured or not measured sometimes, right? So what if you were to have a more of a front row seat, right? A better visibility of both internal operations through continuous input, right? Maybe you could continue to improve strategy and performance. Again, there are continuous gaps that we see, right? We receive insights in one format, performance data from field medical team and medical information team in one CRM, and then others in medical communications and publications who also see critical KOLs or who may be in headquarters, who may provide performance or strategy data in different platforms. A lot of this takes a lot of time, right? And there's recall bias, various different sources of bias as well, and compliance restrictions, right? So more data here that I want to share with you, Alan, that we talked about in previous webinars, as we have some continuity here between all the learning that has taken place over the last 6 months here. When we surveyed KOLs, it seems like they see that the quality of the communication is also variable, that there's actually lack of internal coordination. So they may see a rep who doesn't know that the same physician saw the MSL previously, or vice versa, right? 44% of the time, right? And so these are some of the real world manifestations of this inefficiency, right? And as I listened to the presentation that you delivered at Financial Times in London, where you talked about their need to work more collaboratively, I thought this diagram was very relevant, right? That ultimately we all converge in this continuum of healthcare. In medical, we help identify the right patients, and our commercial colleagues make sure that the right patients have the access to these medications, right? So this leads me to your case study, Alan. I'd like to ask you why ultimately it's critical to design new ways of working in medical affairs today, and how you were able to do that in your case study. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry,
there.
I beg your pardon. We've touched on some of the reasons why it's important to think about new ways of working and closer collaboration. So maybe we jump into the case study, because I would love to have time at the end for any more questions from the audience. So this is a real case study, and what my former company did was they decided to introduce many of the principles of agile methodology, which you'll know comes from the tech center. It comes from IT and technology. So it's not 100% applicable to pharma, but there are some good things within agile methodology. And what happened was they took away people's focus on therapy areas and they became single product focused. And so we made brand teams that were created with 2 equal colleagues, one commercial and one medical. Now, their pay grade may have been slightly different, maybe one level different, sometimes the same, but their leadership was equal. Okay, so the commercial didn't have any veto over anything that medical did. And the other interesting thing is that along with the principles of agile methodology, there was no direct reports allowed within the brand team. So people could not have any of their own team members, as part of that core. And the core brand team was maybe around 6 people from various functions, including commercial and medical. But there would also be field medical there. There'd be someone from sales as well. There'd be someone from access. And it varied a little bit. Now, the interesting thing was that we wanted to unite the whole team around a common set of KPIs. So each of the 5 or 6 team members would bring 1, maybe 2 KPIs, and the whole team agrees to live and die. In other words, everyone accepts everyone else's KPIs. The only thing that was not true, of course, was sales targets for medical were not applicable. That's not considered in any way compliant. And I think more from an external perception than anything else. But so sales didn't apply, but everything else did. And then at the end of the year, the co-leads, medical and commercial, would rate the whole team, including themselves, with a bit of sanity checking from their own line managers. And they would rate against the KPIs that they'd agreed at the beginning of the year. And then the whole team would get the same rating. Now, what did this achieve? Well, in the past, there were examples of medical ticking all the boxes and maybe getting a really good rating, but the commercial performance of the brand was not up to expectations. So people with sales targets didn't do so well. And then said, well, how, we're all in the same team here. How come medical get more bonus and we don't? So, and sometimes it can also work the other way. A brand can way overperform. Marketing, sales do brilliantly in bonus, but medical just gets fully meets expectations or whatever. Mm-hmm. So this was the solution. Common set of KPIs. Everyone wins or everyone loses together. Like a proper team. My sport, it was rowing. And the whole team wins together or loses together. But there's half the team didn't win and half didn't lose. And the other interesting thing is, in my former company, 50% of the rating is on how you did things. Okay, it used to be 30 and it was moved to 50 because it was realized that how you do things is just as important as what you do. No point in achieving your objectives if you leave a trail of destruction in your wake. So I have to say that there was extensive consultation with legal and the ethics and compliance. So this was a big change for my former company. And also the line manager's role. So all the people in the brand team would have a line manager, but the line manager's role changed not so much of end of year rating, because that was pretty much done within the brand team. It was more of subject matter expert and coach. So big changes. I have to say this is ongoing. The US went early because they could. The need for change in Europe, sort of the requirements for change in Europe, often require a lot of consultation with various works councils, etc. So some of this is totally work in progress, but the US have completed pretty much one full year and are doing really well. So I would just throw that in there. Just my last slide, if we could move to the second one. So just a quick comment on KPIs. And as we said at the beginning, you know, we wanted outcome-based KPIs, not activities, not how many people did you see, how long did you spend on average with them, how many emails have you sent. It was what difference have you made to patients? So start with the end in mind. And we said, what changes do you want to see in the healthcare system that actually improve the lives of patients? And it could, and these are just examples, like more patients treated as per nationally recognized and independently produced guidelines, or more patients treated to target, etc. What then needs to be true in the healthcare system to allow this to happen? So, okay, if there are national guidelines, your medicines have got to be in there. Okay, so how do you get your medicine included? So that would be part of a composite KPI. Maybe we need more people to be aware of the data behind the medicine and why they should use it in certain patients as their first choice. So more education of HCPs, other relevant decision makers, payers, etc. And then finally, what does medical affairs need to do to make this happen? And so just a simple example, if we want to get our medicine into the guidelines, well, we probably know the guideline committee members, the likely members. So maybe we say there's 10 people, we need to see every one of them and brief them and make sure they're aware of the data, the good and the bad and the ugly. Or maybe, you know, we get educational need gap analysis from MSL Insights, who knows? So the actual KPI for medical might be a combination of a number of activities, not just one thing, but it will all be outcome focused. Again, going back to what changes, what benefits do you want patients to receive as a result of the activities? And this way of thinking, you know, just made people really flip round, and they stopped thinking about what I call vanity metrics, which is simply just counting stuff because you can. And not all of this is easy to measure either. You know, it can be easier in the US where you have access to claims databases, but it's not so easy in Europe. You may have to rely more on market research, which has obviously got some rate of error in place. But you know, if you consistently apply the methodology, you know, to an ATU, for instance, then at least you'll be able to spot trends over time. So it's really interesting. But the ultimate goal was, you know, outcome-based KPIs and shared common goals that everyone can sign up to, because you feel much more of a team if you all know that you're all jointly responsible for everything, with the exception of sales for medical. So that was what we did. And maybe at the end there might be some time for questions. I'm sure this is a little bit controversial for some people. I have to say there was a lot of internal discussion too. But again, trying to get people united behind a common goal was the ultimate aim. And I would say the initial feedback, at least from the US, was pretty positive. And also in my former company, Germany sort of did something like this a little bit ahead of the game. And the difference in Germany was absolutely tangible. It was really amazing. Now, they didn't go the whole way to what I've just described in the previous slide, but they went significantly towards that. And it had a huge change in the closeness of working between medical and commercial. So I'll stop there, Tim.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that very practical case study. I'm glad to see the impact that it had. And ultimately at Amadeus Pharma, I share these sentiments to address the ultimate unseen motivational factors behind performance, which is everyone's natural interest and need to feel the impact that they're making on the company's success. Right. We do have one quick comment from Jay Patel here. Okay. So, yeah, was there also focus on implementing an agile mindset to achieve the outcome, or using agile tools and processes?
100%, Jay. Absolutely. I mean, agile is much more about mindset than anything else. It's not we talked about huddles and sprints and all sorts of things, but you're correct. There were some tools available, but it was all about mindset, and we actually put agile coaches in place to help the brand teams get comfortable with the whole concept of how agile works. Now, I'm not the biggest fan in the world, I have to say. I don't think it ports 100% over to pharma, but there are definitely some really good things with this agile mindset, where you may have to just drop everything and go into a sprint to get a problem solved. But because people have got the mindset, they go, yeah, fine, I'm happy to drop this. We're all signed up to the same KPIs. If it's important for you, it's got to be important for me too. And therefore, I'll drop everything and we'll lock ourselves in a room. We'll discuss the problem. We'll come up with some solutions. So the mindset was absolutely critical.
Okay, here's one more follow-up question as well. Let's take just a few seconds here to read it from Mark Rees Saunders. Question is about MSLs. Were they given specific KPIs, and how was the outcome of that briefing assessed? What was the expectation?
Well, Mark, I feel you should probably know the answer better than I do, since you were together with me in Astellas, and I think we know about. I would say the MSLs across Astellas probably were given different KPIs in different countries. There was a lot of inconsistency about this. Mm-hmm. Now, you were leading the charge to try and harmonize things. You were the global head of field medical excellence. And so a lot of the good work that you did, Mark, was to try and make sense of the KPIs and try and make them meaningful. So I'm smiling a little bit at the question. Because I think you know the answer probably much better than I do. But yes, there was a lot of variability. I think, I'd love to say that things have much improved, but I'm no longer there, so I can't really say with my hand in my heart that things are much better. But there certainly is. You know as well, Mark, there was a massive focus on field medical and how important they are to a company and how, they are the eyes and ears out in the field for medical. But yeah, there was still quite a lot of inconsistency. But the KPIs that they were bringing into there would be a field medical manager coming into these core brand teams. And yes, they would come with their own KPIs. They would vary from country to country, and they would probably vary from product to product. So it's hard to give a definitive answer to what that looked like. Okay. But they certainly had their KPIs, one or two that were deemed to be critical, and they formed part of the overall brand team KPI, core brand team KPI.
Okay. Alex, I know you have a lot of experience in consulting organizations as well. Any brief comment on the case study?
I think it's a great case study, and I love the idea of sort of emphasizing the agile principles through that sort of co-leadership model. Obviously, it's easy to do on paper, harder to do in real life. Bringing sort of these diverse sort of mindsets together, and sort of moving teams from therapeutic to just working on one brand. And so I think a great sort of conclusion of this is it's a great example of balancing the what, which was the deliverables and targets, with the how, which is the collaboration, the behaviors for the year-end ratings. And I think it actually segues well into sort of what Amadea and the Ancora product looks to do, which is sort of bring that metric into medical affairs. And so I think it's a wonderful management style and exercise as well. And so would be great to see this sort of created amongst other companies as well. And just that commercial and medical synergy, I think, is super important. One hand sees what the other hand is doing is very good. And so also insights are going to bubble up from different perspectives. So I think, I don't know, Alan, if that was sort of a takeaway as well as, a medical team would have a comment on a commercial and a commercial on a medical, and it would sort of create a very good, dialogue.
Yep.
Yeah, no, 100%, Alex. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And I say with the equal co-leadership, it meant that, everybody, the medical and commercial leads could comment on everybody. It wasn't a case of, well, I'll rate my field medical head and my whatever, and I'll rate my market access person. No, everyone had a view on everyone. And of course, if you get really good team dynamics, the team will be rating themselves, and giving feedback to themselves and feedback to each other. But as I say, for most countries, it's work in progress.
Yeah. So after spending 20 years in medical affairs, as you know, I formed my consulting agency, Amadea Pharma, based on the concept of bringing the transparency of sports and the precision of data science into daily operations. And I have a particular appreciation for the what and the how, right? And and performance and behaviors. This is the movement that we have started at Amadea Pharma, and I was very excited about, really sharing this case study. The 50% breakdown of performance and behaviors is the only formula, we believe at Amadea Pharma, that ensures sportsmanship, right? Not only collaboration and performance, but also holding ourselves accountable for how we work with others. And so let's now shift gears towards more of the processes, right? And how do we make this approach of improved decision making more scientific? Okay, so as I pose this question, I want to share, and the question is, how can we use a more scientific approach, as I mentioned, towards selecting the best KPI at the right time? Because you alluded to this, Alan, that the quality of metrics changes over time at different stages of the product life cycle. And so before I hear some more comments from the audience and you, I want to share our vision of some of the problems from a process standpoint, from a scientific standpoint. Okay. Traditionally, we don't prioritize numerically one activity versus another. We capture a lot of different things, but these are absolute numbers, right? So where everything has the same priority, either nothing gets done or it doesn't get done with quality or with consistency. Okay. And so a KPI really has to describe that relationship between activities and outcomes. So we actually do a lot of guesswork, right? We design KPIs as exploratory kind of endpoints, if in this analogy to clinical studies. Instead, what if we were to take a more clinical study type of an approach to measuring metrics, right? Where you have, let's say, a statistical hierarchy of different endpoints, right? One is higher order than another when you design studies, right? In order to make sure that they are approved and actually reach patients, right? And the other problem, of course, is that we don't always follow through completely on our activities to understand, did it really drive that outcome? Was it positive? Was it negative? We also learn a lot from negative, what we fail in, right? And so that KPI has to follow along that line, right? Directly, right? To describe that relationship better between activities and outcomes. And so what we have implemented at Amadea Pharma is a data science grading, KPI grading of metrics. Okay, that's modeled across data science principles. Is it relevant? Does it correlate? Is it associated? Is it correlated, or is it causal to the outcomes? Okay, and we're going beyond analogies, that all organizations are using, and in order to ensure continuous improvement of quality, there are 3 steps you have to take, right? Set clear benchmarks by listing and ranking activities capturing quality data, ensuring that there's integrity of that data, tracing that out, that the contributions that medical is making, grading the KPIs, and then raising new standards, right? Modifying those goals before you start the cycle again, right? And before you initiate this type of a framework, you have to really simplify all performance data into two categories: activities and outcomes. Define those medical outcomes and rank them by priority, right? It starts with really quantifying the priority, right? And everything that you do. Before I share just a quick preview of the Ancora dashboards, what is your opinion on on making those decisions more scientifically, of what KPIs to use when? Alan or Alex or the audience, please feel free to comment.
I'll let Alex comment, I think.
Yeah, I think definitely use of KPIs is going to help, folks sort of have a goal in mind, and, sort of how does their own effort also stack up with the organization's goal, and how do you bridge the gap? So that's very important. Scientifically, I think that's a very good question, Tim. I think there's got to be more standardization there across an organization, and even in between organizations, to have more sort of weight related to effort for certain actions and insights gleaned from field work, internal and external. So I think that's very important, and I think that's somewhere that the industry has to start to think to go. And we've seen sort of CRMs for sales, all types of metrics and KPIs for marketing. And I think with medical affairs, we have to be very mindful of sort of the gray area between, the metrics on the sales and the marketing side. But I think we are moving in that direction.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, so the title of this webinar, of course, is Smarter Medical Decision Systems. So our approach at Amadea Pharma is to improve that visibility, right? And get that feedback from the entire team, right? Internal feedback, external, a lot of the work that sometimes is not valued or is not seen, right? Because to make better decisions, you have to change how you see, and to change how you see things, you need to change how you think. And this is what we really need to adapt, I think. And I'm very interested in your comments on a few different types of models that we have now made available to our medical affairs community, Alan. As we've mentioned in previous webinars, metrics is a moving target, right? And so what we have now created is this type of a live KPI graded recommendations dashboard, okay, that is designed to make sure that that you're spending most of your time in the highest impact activities, those types of activities that are going to be more likely to drive outcomes, right? And grade that relationship based on the parameters that you yourself are able to set, right? As a team leader, right? Using a platform versus an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so this is what I had previously done as a consultant, also through my transition from being an employee, working on consolidating a lot of data with an Excel with various companies, and I have now created this type of a dashboard in Ancora. And so once you click, and now actually I'm in the actual platform, and when you click for more details, you're able to understand what that priority is for this particular activity, right? So out of 11 activities, 2 drove outcomes. And you have different KPIs that contain or that include that particular activity that you may start to measure next quarter or next year, for example. All right. And Another interesting, I think, dashboard that I wanted to display here is generating some real-world evidence on clinical outcome improvement. Okay, so showing how your medical information that you generate and you distribute ultimately improves outcomes, right? Or identifies the right patient, or in some instances may exclude patients as well. And this is based on published data, okay, that shows the direct benefits that we have in medical affairs, avoiding hospitalizations, right? Drug interactions, all of which have a lot of benefit, right, on the healthcare system as well. And so, yes, there's claims data that you can, and you can also that they can use, but you can also systematically generate this evidence, in a frequency that follows the medical information responses, for example, that you disseminate. So I want to take a pause there and see, how you could potentially see yourself, let's say, applying some of these dashboards to that case study that you had. Let's say you get the team together across the functions, right? What kind of value is there in actually having more graded real-time recommendations on the strength of every KPI at every single time? Do you see yourself using something like this, like in that case study?
Yeah. So very briefly, because I know we're up against time. These core brand teams, they meet on a very regular basis, and I would imagine that having a tool like that would almost be the kickoff. You'd show the snapshots of the dashboard. Hey guys, this is where we are. It's what we're doing. Where do we need to focus on the next week or the next 2 weeks? What do we need to change? And it's very visual. And also that's what you share up the line as well. A few slides with the dashboard tells a lot of information to your line manager and your line manager's line manager. So I can see that being incorporated into, every meeting, every brand team meeting that you would have.
Okay, great. Well, it's time to wrap up. Like you said, I want to share, one recent article that Alex actually made me aware of. Okay, and I think it's very relevant to the sports and data science principles that we're bringing right into operations, and it comes from Jamie Dimon, okay, of JP Morgan, who says the modern CEOs have to operate like world's top athletes. It's sports is no longer a metaphor, he says, and this was published in Forbes actually just this week. So Alex, thank you very much for bringing it to my attention. And here is actually what we're talking about, right? This quote in particular. I want to, I think ask for your key takeaways. How do we bring better decision making? Make those difficult decisions easier and more objective. What are some last takeaways that you have for our audience?
So for me, we shouldn't shy away from KPIs. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be looking at our performance, and we need to be looking at the KPIs that make the biggest difference to patients. In other words, outcome-focused KPIs, and we need to make sure that everyone's aware that we're looking at these things, and share them, and don't be shy. Keep repeating them, within the company. Tell people what's happening, because honestly, if we don't do it in medical affairs, no one else will.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, and I'll sort of echo what Alan mentioned, but rather just from a transparency perspective of, measuring the correct KPIs as sort of discussed amongst the team, whether that's a co-leadership model or therapeutic unit, and having sort of that data and dashboard to bring to leadership for maybe updating the strategy, maybe requesting new funds for expanding the team. So I think that could be super helpful.
Yep, absolutely. Well, wonderful. I think we heard it clear, loud and clear. Start with the outcome in mind, with patients' goals in mind. Design new ways of working across teams. Work closely. To generate the real results, you need to have real views, right? And own the system, own the decision making. These are some of my thoughts as well. And if you want to continue the conversation, make sure to get in touch. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Very active there. And this is my email, timmick@amadevpharma.com. We're bringing some excitement, some meaning, some decision making to the industry, and also on to our next topic that you'll be hearing a lot about, and that is Medical Innovation Olympics. Here is just the website. I'll post a comment. Make sure to register. Layer the science, leap with defiance. Innovation takes courage, takes time, and it's actually it's a exciting type of a atmosphere with Olympic gold medalists that you will not forget. So look out for my comment, and I invite you also, Alex, to join us at the Medical Innovation Olympics. This is the 4th year we're doing this. And there's a comment here from Jaya Kumar. Can you please share the PowerPoint? Absolutely. Those who registered will receive the slides. Look out for the comment as well with the discount code for the Innovation Olympics. See you there. Alex, thank you. Thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Tim.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Great.